Loves here, and today we're going to be talking about rhythm, one of the 5 major elements of any song. And along those lines, we're going to be looking at how it interacts with the other elements. I have a whole series devoted to rhythm just as a thing, and you can go check that out if you want more of the details, and you should if you're going to be composing. But we're going to look at several tracks and look at how rhythm influences the various roles that can happen in your song or your beat or whatever it is. So typically in a beat, rhythm will play a supporting role. It's usually not a main role, but we will take a look at some stuff where rhythm is instead a theme. It is a major focus, and it is developed as you would a melody, only this time we're looking at a rhythm. This is often done through the embellishment and development of sounds. And so we'll take a look at that. They're very intertwined, these ones. So in this case, this is our first example. This is something that'd be very suitable for a commercial. It starts off with basically just rhythm and harmony. What I want you to note why I play it, we're going to get up to like maybe where the drums come in over here. And what I want you to pay attention to is, how do I establish my rhythm? How do I shift the roles of the sounds I've picked away from a rhythm to something else? And how does it impact the harmony and sounds I have chosen? Like, do my choices make sense? Are they beneficial? Or in your opinion, are they not good decisions? Would you have chosen a different rhythm or a different sound? Something I'm going to be sort of ignoring, but is ultra important, is the idea of meter, because that's a rhythmic concept, but we're looking at it in context of the big 5 elements, not as rhythm as a subject. So like things like velocity, using to establish meter and funk and stuff. We'll take a brief look, but nothing extraordinarily deep. That's what that series is for. So, okay, with those things in mind, here we go. We're going to play through part of this. So there you go. So you've gotten a good taste of how it goes. We've reached a jam session. Later on, I embellish it harmonically by just changing the key. So that's not like a crazy embellishment, but it causes a dramatic change. It sort of is like a new breath of life. But we're talking about rhythm here. So I don't know what your opinions were. Maybe you drop them in the comments or whatever. But here I've give you pretty much just just harmony and rhythm. And I introduced the rhythm through the use of this piano and this guitar pluck. And as they play, they are outlining our chords. So I'm giving you all the harmonic content, like letting you know, heads up, we're going to be using this stuff, and acclimating you to the sounds I'm using. So you're like, oh, these are some nice sounds, it's some nice chords. And the rhythm is it's a steady pulse. So it's going to play a supporting role, like right off the bat. Whenever you have something that is a steady pulse, it will support a melody of some kind. Now, in piano music, if you have a repeating pattern, this is called an ostinato. It's just a repeating figure, and it's really nice. I think it actually means stubborn. Just because it's stubborn, it repeats. And these are really nice because they allow you to be more creative with your melody later on. And later on, I do introduce a melody. I take the piano and I keep the role in the background, but when the guitar comes in, also playing a supporting role, the rhythm gets a little more complicated. It varies up just a little bit because now the guitar is playing in and strumming at different rates, and that causes a shift in how you perceive the rhythm. So that adds some new life. So we're just taking a look here like, oh, rhythm is playing a supporting role. It's enhancing it, and I'm using sound to sort of embellish my rhythm further. So it's a very simple rhythm, and I'm keeping it interesting by changing the sound and changing what things were in the forefront. So over here, this is all that's going on, and that's plenty interesting. You haven't heard the rest of the beat yet. So you're like, oh, this is an interesting deal. What's happening? But if I just kept doing this, that would be boring. So I begin to introduce new things and slowly shift it and put it into its place as a supporting role. And that's just something that is really, you're listening to a good song when things you begin to sort of see where they go. You're like, oh, this guitar is not the main idea, but it is a cool part. And the composer or the producer or whoever it was wanted me to appreciate the coolness of this and then put it in the background. Other times you don't want things in the front at all. And so this is an example of what I would term a layering introduction. So you introduce a couple layers, and then you introduce a couple more and a couple more, and then eventually you have a whole bunch going, and then you have to dynamically work with it. And you notice my things, I don't think they repeat at all here. This is typical of a pattern workflow. So I'll start here and work with something and develop it, and I'll change a bunch of stuff, and then I'll clone it again, and then I'll add more stuff and change it around, and then I'll experiment with the order they go in. And so let's really quick talk about the drums while we're here. We're going to look at several other pieces, but these drums emphasize a larger rhythmic movement. So inside this rhythm, I'm using it to establish sort of there's a chord change introduced by the piano every bar. And that's something that you're basically going to be expecting now. And this figure is very stubborn as well. And so as these figures go in, I want to form a smaller rhythm, a subdivision inside my larger idea. And drums are excellent for this. They allow us to divide up the beat in an interesting, non-monotonous way. It's not a boring way. It's not a way that's like, oh my gosh, stop it. Like a metronome would be for you people out there who play instruments and practice with those, which you should be if you play an instrument. Then it's not like a metronome. It's kind of funny how drums, they're not like metronomes. And it's because they introduce meter, and there's several timbres, and you can get a whole variety of textures out of how you hit the drum. But it allows us to chop it up smaller, and that allowed me to give emphasis to beats 1 and then 2 and 3 and 4, all the beats, but in a way that would be musically useful so that my melody could sit on top and jam out with the rest of my song. So this is a very simple example, kind of a cool deal. We're not going to take a look at the harmony and whatnot in this particular case. Now we're going to move over to another rhythmic example. Let's look at a rhythm that develops, a piece where, well, actually, let's go to a more conservative example first, and then we'll jump to that. So I'm going to show you one where the melodic idea is the main idea, and we use the rhythm as a backbone to the melodic idea. So our next one is actually far, far away on Judea's plains. I was asked by a friend, hey, could you make a rap, beat, hip-hop version thing? I'm not sure what his exact vision was, but I kind of got the gist. He wanted something that sounded kind of like a cool trap style beat deal. So I was like, okay, I can do something like that. And so I took the melody and wrote it out. And so I know immediately, because it's got to sound like this song. So it's got to be melodic driven. So I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to create the beat? So the first thing I do is I make it minor, because it's got to be minor. And so I have this little intro, and that just gives the idea, like, hey, this is a thing I'm going to be messing with. And then I introduce it, and my beat, you can see here, I've cloned it. That's whenever you see these numbers next to it, that means at some point I cloned it. And so I wrote out my first beat, and I add in a number of things. This is actually a more complicated track than I thought it was going to be when I started. But let me go ahead and play it from here. You'll probably hear samples loading up because I haven't played it yet. So it might completely leave parts out, but here we go. So you see there, that's an example. And you see that the beat plays a very large supporting role. This is probably more typical of when someone says, make me a beat. They're probably thinking of a beat more like this. And the way this works is, first I listen to my melody and I get a feel for what do I want to do. And I'm like, okay, I need a kick drum, and I need the general parts of a beat. So I begin to work, and you see that I start lining up my kicks. Now my kicks, I don't line them up all the time on the down beats. And the reason is, and if you don't know what that is, you need to watch the rhythm series. I don't line them up on the down beats because all the time because that's very expected. It's not as enjoyable. We'll look at drums and sounds later, but you see that the rhythm, here's the kick drum. Like, let's just solo the kicks. And then I have an 808 long, which is that thing that pops up. That's boom. If you can't hear that, it's because you're listening on a device that doesn't have sub bass support. And so then I added my snare, and this snare just emphasizes the upbeats, basically. The beats that are less important, but still pretty important. And you see that the snare actually is also playing a melodic role too. And it's doing it in a rhythmic fashion. That's what's so great about the snare drum. So I'm pitching my snare up and down to fit in with the melody. And this part is I'm listening and custom fitting it to the melody. So at this point, before it's just the kick and stuff, right? So I'll listen. So right there, I do a syncopated deal. It's like, whoa, like what the heck just went on there? And that was custom fit with the melody. I had to listen to the melody and then think about what I wanted to do. Then I was like, okay, I added my snare to bring up those beats that felt sort of empty. And then finally, I wanted some subdivision. We already talked about this before, but that's why these things work out so good is they divide up what we already have there, but in a way that will enhance the melody that's already going on. And so I do that here. Now the hats in this style of music typically draw quite a bit of attention, but they're also easy to set aside in the background and just let them roll. And you know they're there, but they're not in the way. So that's what's going on there. Now, these kinds of things just take forever because this looks simple. Well, it sounds simple and it looks simple because it's all in one pattern, but there's a lot going on. And I have various strings. I have a harp. I have the various strings. I have a couple of string sections. I have bells. Just tons of fun stuff is going on in there. But I'm going to leave that here. But this is another great example of rhythm supporting a melody instead. Let's look at an example where a rhythm would be developed into an idea rather than just being by itself. This one's a little experimental, and I'm going to open it this way. All right, so this one is not done. It's not been published. It's a mess, but it's got some cool ideas. The reason is it's experimental, so it's always hard to tell from a artistic standpoint when you're done with these things. They're so strange. But anyways, what you're going to see, what you are about to experience, is you will hear this quarter note thing from my friend playing the guitar, and we really just janked it up. And then it develops in combination with the sound design to form a rhythm. So it goes, you'll hear it. And then the drums will slowly come in. Like rhythm seemingly morphs out of just this noise, right? It's kind of an interesting deal. And then if we arrive over here where we have a very clearly defined rhythm, and I believe I was in the process of, I haven't mixed it yet. So things are buried, other things aren't, so it's a mess. But anyways, I'll play for you a portion, and I'm just going to encourage you to just follow the rhythm. Just pay attention to how the rhythm forms out of this stuff. This is also why breakcore, check out breakcore if you haven't, like Ruby My Dear or Igor spelled with 3 R's. That's some crazy rhythms there. Like if you're really into the abstract rhythm territory, that's where you want to go. But anyways, here is an example of rhythm that could be developed. So we have our theme and we'll develop it. So you get the idea. Now this lives sort of within itself, and it basically becomes a riser as well. Is what goes on here. But so in order for it to be really considered a theme, I suppose I'd have to include it and embellish it in different parts. But this thing also becomes a thing, and we develop it, and it becomes crazy. So for example, you heard it over there. You kind of need to hear it as it changes, but I'm going to skip to like right around here because it gets kind of crazy. So you'd see it's a very rhythmically driven thing. And this is just an example. It's not been mixed. It could sound incredibly larger than it does currently. But it's very sort of an interesting idea. And I just wanted to show you what those sort of things are. So if you get into the academic study of how these things roll out and sound, it can get quite fun. And then production value and everything gets like more complicated. When you want to do a production like this, everything just becomes, because I had to record a guitar. We had to discuss about what we wanted to record and how we're going to put it together, what kind of processing. This is a lot of stuff's happening, and it's just an intense thing to do. So it takes a while, and you move your way up projects and stuff like this. This is just an example of where we have rhythmic ideas and we develop them. And so it's a very different sort of story. We definitely move into a different world. So let's go ahead and take a look at another example. Okay, so this is a glitch hop beat, and it's a track. It's a little loop. It's a 4-bar loop, but I take advantage of swing rhythms here. Some people think I've gone too far on the swing scale, but I think it's fine. And so whenever you're writing to sound realistic, you're going to get into the habit. You got to write things behind the beat, before the beats. So this is our first example of something where we're shifting the way things typically are interpreted. So these are swing rhythms. My swing meter's all the way up, which people freak out about. I've had multiple people be like, what the heck? But you see these rhythms are like pretty crazy and out there. And there's like just some stuff like this. And there's like, what the heck's going on in here? That's the hi-hat. The answer is yes. So here we go. I'm going to just play it for you real quick. So I had some samples not load, so that's why there's that weird string mixture with brass thing. There's supposed to be bump, 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 like that. But it didn't load all the way. That's fine, though. But you see we have timbral sound design happening, but we have this boom, 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 boom. So we're going to focus on the drums because there's like all sorts of timbral sound design going on there. And this is a great example of a genre that has shifted and taken the sound and harmonic. I wouldn't call this harmony. These are sound. And we've mixed our sound now with our rhythmic content in a fashion that develops a rhythm. And so that's where a lot of EDM genres sit. Well, not very many, I guess, if you consider the number of trance and house genres versus dubstep and glitch hop and stuff like that. I think there's more, because drum and bass, there's more of those type. Anyways, that's an aside. So this is what we have. So anytime you hear that boom, 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 that's a really great example if we throw in our... That's so cool. I love this kind of stuff. This is the stuff I jam out to in the car. Anyways, I'm moving the pitch around via the notes I picked, and you can see the rhythm there. So it's like bum, bum, bum. And you might be going, how do you get a feel for that? You have to listen to the style of music. But what we've done now is instead of going dun 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 dun, which would be a straight rhythm, we've gone dun 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 dun. And we've told basically, whenever we write rhythms that are straight, we want it to fundamentally shift it. So it goes from bum, 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 bum to bum, 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 even though they look the same. And so that's why this sounds different than it would before. See, that doesn't make any sense the way it interpreted it, but that's because of the swing we have going on. So we got rid of the swing. So you see it's a different feel. It's not a bad feel. It's just different. So in combination with the drums, and so you see my drums here, they look like this. And I have a variety. I have 2 loops going on. So it doesn't sound complete without the other one because I place emphasis on the beats a little bit differently. But you see the doon, 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 doon. So I'm deliberately taking advantage of the swing here. So those are some of the options you have there. Now, if we look at this in a larger standpoint, we could get quite complicated with all like the rhythms that are going on with everything else in the beat. Like just there's all this automation and all these different sounds. We're not going to delve into this because the process to achieve something like this is not as complicated as analyzing all the rhythms like this. Like that'd be overkill. It's just a lot of experimentation with sound design and understanding where you want the main emphasis to go. So I'm like main emphasis on beat 1, and I want it to be delayed emphasis by shifting the importance of the beat. So normally it'd be 1 and 2, while I want to be bum, bum, ba, bum. So I'll change the way the sound moves to try and get something closer to that. When I find something that's desirable, then I move on. I'm like, that sounds cool. So that's pretty much the process. But it's a very, very interesting, rhythmically compelling thing. So now we're going to look at another piece, and this is going to be more of a conventional one where we will shift where the beats land to change the feel of the piece. So here, if we were to shift things slightly before or after the beat, we'll create a more humanistic performance. Funk will be slightly shifted generally before or after the beat. They don't ever land right on the beat. They make you go for the beat. So it's like dun dun da 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 bum bum ba dum ba dum ba dum ba da. Like it's like slightly off, but it like lands in a larger groove. So we have this idea of 1 and 2 and 1 and 2, but all the stuff in the middle is like been moved around. It's not dun 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 dun. Now it's like dun da 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 dun da dun dun da dun da dun da dun dun da dun da dun dun. Like it's not quite on the beat anymore. So let's look at one of those. Okay, so this is a really, really simple example, but it proves my point. So what I have here is I have some chords being played, but I don't want them to sound like the chords are all being hit at the same time because it's like dun dun, like it's not as smooth and it doesn't create the atmosphere. The rhythm's gotten in my way. It's not playing. It's playing its supporting role, but it's been enlarged a little too much. So I'm gonna make it a little more subtle by causing the notes to be hit barely behind the beat, like just slightly behind the beat. It causes the feel of a piano player rolling their hand across the keyboard as opposed to hitting all the keys at the same time. And then later on when we have our rhythm, it's in one of these. I think it's in parts, pattern 7. There we go. So these kinds of things, these are stylistic things that are hard to get right any other way. So you have to draw the note off the grid, and you're going to move it slightly before or after the note. In this case, this is just a grace note. But when you're writing these things in and you're moving notes slightly on and off, it's going to not quite fit on the grid. This is going to add an element of humanism to it, enhancing it from a rhythmic standpoint. You're creating a different feel. Like we're able to detect shifts like this, and they create the different genres that we're familiar with. If I go to like, so this is a beat that instead of going through and changing all the notes, I just went ahead and played it in, and I wound up with a melody that sounded pretty cool. And we can see the rhythmic shift in this piece pretty easy too. First I lay down a rhythmic idea, and it becomes interesting at first, but it fades into the background through repetition, and then I have the bed for a melodic idea. I've shown you this in other tutorials. So anyways, you get the idea. We're off the grid. Like nothing's quite on the grid, and that creates the feel. In some cases, it's a little too off the grid, so I need to go in there and change some of those things. I just haven't revisited this in a while. And that's pretty much just all I want to say about that. So we see that we can have rhythms that are supporting a melody. We can have rhythms that create a feeling, these are small movements across a larger idea that create a feeling of slightly behind or off the beat or on the beat. And this can sometimes be what makes a great drummer great versus an average drummer. Well, this is what makes a great drummer great. They know when to do these things. A bad drummer just is out of time. They slow down, they speed up. They're just a mess. So we have something that can support a melody. We have these changes in style because of our rhythm. We have the ability to start off with a rhythmic idea and fade it to the background to a supporting role. And we can do vice versa. We can bring it forward through the use of fills, rhythmic variation, to keep things lively. If you have the same drum loop repeating in the background over and over and over, people will tend to notice. They'll be like, hey, you should change that up. I've now predicted it so well that it's no longer interesting at all. That's why my drum loops have clones, but then you'll see these things in the middle that are different just to keep things variable. And that's all dependent on how complicated your drum loop is. Like these lend themselves very nicely to repetition, so I don't feel too pressured. But if I wanted to, I could come in here and chop it up and make a slightly different beat just to keep things varied, so you don't expect it to be coming. But my other stuff's so interesting, it's like so demanding of your attention that I can get away with these sorts of moves, which in this case, if I were to make these more complicated, that might actually be a bad idea. So you mess with the balance of these elements. But here, that's several examples of rhythm. That's some of my thoughts on it. I mean, now you can listen to a piece and you can now sort of hopefully understand the elements of rhythm. So that's my challenge to you, is write two pieces, one with a rhythmic idea being the forefront and then fading to the back, and then another one where it plays a supporting role in combination with one of the other 5 elements, and then make a video explaining what you did, the ideas behind it. Also, just go ahead and look up some of your favorite songs and write what the role of rhythm is. How did they use it in combination with the other 5 elements? Become more conscious of this thing as it's going through. Some are going to be more complicated than others. Look for overarching themes. Don't get bogged down in tiny details. I know it seems like this stylistic one, like, oh, it's slightly off. Like, these are pretty small details, but it's a general feeling that it creates is what we're after. We just know that this is one of the ways it's accomplished. And by consistently doing one behind the beat or ahead of the beat, which in this case, this one's ahead of the beat and this one's behind the beat, by consistently doing this, we will create a feel. So if I wanted to be more consistent, I could change this. Unless I am doing something consistently on this off beat. Like you see, this one does the same thing. This one looks like it's this one's slightly behind. So you might go through there and look for consistencies like that. I might consider shifting things around, because if it's all on the grid, it's going to sound just really rigid. Also, if your velocities are all the same, which is covered in the Rhythmic series. Anyways, that's that. If you have any questions, let me know. Support me on Patreon, and have a blessed day.